Ciao! Rieccoci qui con un nuovo video di grammatica. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have a new video that talks about grammar. I want to review with you two very important Italian verbs. These verbs can be used alone or they can be used as auxiliary verbs when you have more complicated compound verb tenses. We will not go into those verb tenses today, but we will look at them at the present tense. I want you to focus on these verbs as normal verbs and just keep in mind that you will also use them further down this learning process when you will learn more complicated verb conjugations. This video might seem easy for many of you, but for beginners it is very important that these verbs are clearly understood from an early stage of their learning adventure. Why do I say this? Well, because you will need to use these verbs if you are creating basic sentences, and you will not always use them in the same way as you do with those same verbs if you translate them into English. So they can be a little tricky sometimes. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the verbs essere, which means to be, and the verb avere, which means to have. As I told you before, today we will conjugate these verbs in the present tense. So let's immediately see how they are conjugated. We will begin with the verb essere, so the verb to be. If you want to, repeat it after me. Io sono, tu sei, lui, lei è, noi siamo, voi siete, loro sono. Remember that when you're writing it out, you absolutely need to remember to insert the accent when you're using the third person singular. So basically, when you have lui or lei è, he or she is, you see that you have that little è with the accent. You need to absolutely write it there. So you would have an example in lui è Marco, lei è Maria. If you do not write the graphic accent, you're not using a verb, but you're using the conjunction e, which means and. Look at this sentence. Marco e Maria. This would be Marco and Maria. So be careful and remember the accent when you write it out. When will you use the verb essere? So when are you going to use the verb to be in Italian? You will need it when you want to say your name. For example, I can say Io sono Giulia. If you want to say what your job is, lei è insegnante. If you want to say where you are from, you will absolutely need to use this verb. For example, tu sei francese. You will also use it before an adjective when you're describing a person. For example, noi siamo bassi, voi siete alti. Sono bionda. Sei castana. You will also use it if you want to express how you're feeling. For example, I could say, Io sono felice. Tu sei triste. Voi siete stanchi. Or you can also use it with a particular meaning that is linked with a location. Let me give you an example for clarity. If I say, sono al parco, I want to say that I'm at the park. So a synonym in Italian in this case would be trovarsi. Trovarsi means to be found at a place or location. For example, I can say a sentence like mi trovo al parco, and it would mean exactly the same as saying sono al parco. But how about the other verb, the verb avere, the verb to have? Let's look how we conjugate this verb in the present tense form. Ready? Say it with me if you want to. Io ho, tu hai, lui, lei ha, noi abbiamo, voi avete, loro hanno. Just like with the verb essere, you also need to be careful when you're writing out this verb. Because in this case, you do not have an accent, but you have a very important silent H that absolutely needs to be there with the first, second, and third person singular, and with the third person plural. If you do not write out that little H, those words without the H change meaning. So you will no longer have a verb, so be very, very careful. Once again, if you have doubts, always stop and think when you're writing something out. Reread your sentence carefully and ask yourself, is it a verb that I'm using? If so, you need that little H in there. Okay, so let's now look at how we use, when we use this verb. You will use it to say your age. For example, ho 34 anni. You will use it before a noun if you have to describe a person. For example, ho I capelli neri. In this case, you're using the verb avere, ho, and then you have a noun, capelli. You can also describe a person with the verb essere. We saw that just a little bit earlier on. Just like we saw before, in this case, you're using the verb essere and then an adjective. Let's look at an example so that this is clear for you. Sono bionda. Sono is your verb. Bionda, which means blonde, is your adjective. So you can use the verb essere. You can also use the verb avere to express how you physically feel. For example, if it's around lunchtime, I could say, ho fame, I'm hungry. Or I could say, ho sete, which means I'm thirsty. Or if it's around bedtime, you could say, ho sonno, which means I'm sleepy. Be careful here because in English you would use the verb to be and not the verb to have. One last thing that I want to tell you about this verb is that you can use it with the meaning of possession. So the verb ho, to have, means possession. Let's look at another example. La mia amica ha una casa al mare. This means my friend has, in the sense of owning something. In this case, my friend has a house on the beach. Do not worry if these two verbs confuse you. Remember that you're learning a new language. This is not an easy thing to do. So take it easy, write out the verbs, chant them to yourself, and never give up on language learning. If you need to relook at the video and take note of the little rules, do so. And remember that you can always find more information if you jump over to my website at italianlanguagehub.com. And you can always get in touch with me by writing a comment below this video or by sending me an email. All of the details are right below this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope that it helped you. Subscribe to my channel if you want to receive more videos like this one, and feel free to share it with anybody interested in learning a little bit more of Italian. This is it for today. Grazie, ci vediamo la prossima settimana. Ciao!